Ever notice how the most dangerous men in the room never say a word? While everyone else is barking like desperate dogs fighting for scraps of attention, there's always that one guy who just exists, silent, calculating. And somehow every single person in that room is secretly terrified of what he's thinking. That's not luck. That's warfare. Mental warfare. Marcus Aurelius, the most feared emperor in human history, weaponized silence so effectively that grown men would literally tremble in his presence before he even opened his mouth. He discovered something that 99% of modern men will never understand. Your silence isn't just power, it's a psychological nuclear weapon that can destroy someone's confidence without you saying a single word. But here's the part that's going to blow your mind. This technique is so dangerous that when you start using it, people will either worship you or hate you. There's no middle ground, because when you master what I'm about to show you, you don't just get respect, you get something far more valuable. You get inside people's heads rent-free 24/7. I'm about to reveal the 3 forbidden silence techniques that Marcus Aurelius used to psychologically dominate every room he entered. And I'm warning you right now, once you see how this works, you can never unsee it. You'll start noticing who has real power and who's just making noise. Look, most men today have it completely backwards. They think being loud equals being strong. They think interrupting makes them dominant. They think if they're not constantly talking, people will forget they exist. And you know what? They're right about one thing. People do forget them. But not because they are quiet. People forget them because they're forgettable. Because when you're always talking, you're never thinking. And when you're never thinking, you never say anything worth remembering. Here's the brutal truth that's going to sting. If you feel the need to constantly prove you're smart, you're not smart. If you feel the need to constantly prove you're strong, you're weak. And if you feel the need to fill every silence with your voice, you're basically announcing to the world that you're terrified of your own thoughts. Marcus Aurelius understood this at a level that would make modern psychologists weep. This man ruled the largest empire in human history, commanded legions of soldiers, and had the power to execute anyone with a single word. But you know what made him truly terrifying? He chose when to use that power. He chose when to speak. And that choice, that control, that's what separated him from every other emperor who came before him. See, I've spent years studying the psychology of power, the philosophy of influence, and the ancient texts that modern men are too lazy to read. And what I discovered will change how you see every interaction for the rest of your life. So why does silence have this almost supernatural power over people? Why does it make them uncomfortable, curious, and weirdly attracted to you all at the same time? It's because silence triggers something primal in the human brain. When you're quiet, you force other people to fill the void. And when they're filling that void, they're revealing everything about themselves. Their insecurities, their fears, their desperate need for validation. Meanwhile, you're just sitting there, collecting intelligence like a psychological spy. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." But here's what he really meant. While everyone else is losing their minds trying to be heard, you become the one person in the room who doesn't need anything from anyone. And that independence, that's what makes you magnetic. This is what psychologists call the curiosity gap. Your silence creates a mystery that their brain becomes obsessed with solving. And while they're obsessing over you, you're living rent-free in their head. The first technique Marcus Aurelius mastered was the observer's advantage. While everyone else is performing, you're studying. You walk into any situation, and instead of jumping into conversation like a desperate puppy, you watch. You listen. You notice who interrupts who seeks validation, who's trying too hard. Within 5 minutes, you know more about the power dynamics than people who've been talking for an hour. And when you finally do speak, it's surgical. It's precise. You're a sniper who's been studying the battlefield. The second technique that made Marcus Aurelius psychologically untouchable was the power pause. Someone asks you a question, anything from your opinion to "how was your day?" Here's what 99% of men do. They immediately start talking. Word vomit. They fill the silence because silence makes them uncomfortable. But Marcus Aurelius would pause. Not because he didn't know what to say, but because he understood that the pause itself was a weapon. In that pause, the other person's brain goes into overdrive. They start wondering, did I ask something wrong? Is he thinking of something profound? That 3-second pause creates more psychological tension than a 10-minute speech ever could. When you finally respond, your words carry weight. You've trained people to understand that when you speak, it matters. The third and most dangerous technique was the strategic exit. Everyone expects you to stay and fight for your position. They expect you to defend, explain, convince. But Marcus understood something modern men have forgotten. Sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply leave, not storming out like a child, but a calm, calculated exit that leaves everyone wondering what happened. Suddenly, the most interesting person in the room is gone. The conversation dies. People start questioning themselves. And most importantly, they start respecting your time. You're not running away. You're demonstrating that your presence is a privilege, not a right. So, how do you actually implement this without becoming a social outcast? It starts with understanding that this isn't about being antisocial, it's about being selective. Marcus Aurelius wasn't a hermit. He was an emperor who chose his words carefully because he understood their power. First, start small. In your next conversation, instead of immediately responding to every question, take a breath. Count to 3. Let that pause do the work. Watch how people's energy changes when they realize you're not going to fill every silence. Second, become an observer before you become a participant. When you walk into any room, spend the first 5 minutes just watching. Who's trying too hard? Who's actually confident? Who's worth your energy? Third, practice the strategic exit. When conversations become repetitive, when people start complaining without solutions, give yourself permission to leave. Here's your challenge. For the next 7 days, implement just one of these techniques. Pick the one that scares you most. That's probably the one you need most. But here's the warning. Once you start doing this, you can't go back. Once you experience what it feels like to have people hang on your every word, to command respect without demanding it, you'll never want to go back to being just another voice in the crowd. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be one." So stop making excuses. Stop waiting for permission to become the kind of man who doesn't need to prove himself to anyone. If this changed how you think about power and presence, subscribe. We're building an army of men who understand that true strength doesn't announce itself. It just exists. The weak will keep talking. The wise will start listening. Which one are you going to be?